Hi, thought I'd do a quick video on this. So I made a video a while ago on genetic fingerprinting, which is the biggest revolution in crime investigation since fingerprinting. Fingerprinting came along about 1910-ish, 1900, roughly. Um, but yeah, DNA fingerprinting is the biggest revolution because it's allowed indisputable certainty that somebody is guilty when their DNA matches DNA found in a murder or rape victim. But I was recently watching some videos about cold murder cases in America, not Britain, America, and one 30 years old, some of them going about 40, 50 years, one of them 57 years old. There were cases where girls were murdered and raped and murdered, and but it's the power of using a genetic genealogy where they put take DNA bits of DNA and can now use, I think it must be AI. I don't know. I don't actually know how it works, but they're able to reconstruct what somebody probably looks like now or did look like then 40 years ago, and they can sort of age them, and it's pretty accurate. I didn't know they could even do that, and so they put the DNA into a database, and it creates a family tree. I think people have to be involved as well, but they can create a family tree, and they can zoom in on possible relations, on possible relatives, and they then get a sample of DNA either by exhuming a dead body in the graveyard or by getting a sample of somebody's DNA from, say, a cup they drank out of or something. Usually it's done by getting court orders to do it without the knowledge, but you need to identify if the person's the correct person. So, but it means one person he was actually a marine biology graduate. I mean, he raped and murdered this girl, and for 30 years he lived his life, graduated, had a family, had a wife and kids. And then the police approached him when they were certain they're the right man. And there was some other cases where somebody was in his I think he was in his late 70s when he was caught. Um, there've been two other cases where somebody from 57 years ago was identified as the killer and rapist who'd actually died quite a long time ago, but he was identified. And there's another guy a cousin of somebody was identified, and he died previously as well. But of the three or four or five killers who were still alive, apart from one, the other four, when they were quizzed by the police and realized they'd been caught, damn it, they'd been caught, they actually suicided. All of them within 24 hours of being caught and put on bail to appear in a proper court appearance, all of them suicided because they realized they were going to end up going to prison because their DNA had been matched the victim's to DNA in the victim, and it was a 100% certainty it was them. And they realized they were caught, and I don't want to go to prison. So only one chap who's 78 went to prison, but all the others I've seen videos actually suicided because they realized their lives were over. But what I want is the power of genealogy and genetic fingerprinting, which has to be used as well to confirm. But there have been these cold cases. One of them, it says, was 57 years ago in New York. Somebody was killed, a young girl was killed, and they identified a girl who was killed in 57 years ago. I'm not sure exactly 57 years ago from which point, but I think it was recent times. But I think it might have been from the 40s or 50s, was it? Or maybe 1960s. One of them was certainly from the 1960s. But I don't remember exactly which year it was the murder had taken place, but 57 years prior to the genetic genealogy and this investigation, the murder had taken place, and they identified who it was. And it's just, I think somebody else turned out to be a van driver who'd been caught, and often there's people who haven't been on the radar. They've been completely missed by the original investigations. They just because they were actually living quite close by. They'd just been completely missed. Somebody, I think, had been there working as a local potter in a town, and when he got caught after 40 years, something, he killed himself the next day. They were, it was him. Their DNA, his DNA matched the DNA in the victim, but when he was caught, he was just a potter, a highly respected potter. He killed himself when he realized he'd been caught. I'm just amazed at the power of genealogy and DNA fingerprinting. I didn't know it was doing it. It could do this now. So I think something like the Jack the Ripper from London, 18th Victorian era, probably would be impossible, because there's I doubt there's any remains of the victim or the corporates, but yeah, it's amazing. This, it's catching people after, even if they've died, they're able to identify the person and basically close the case and say, we know who it was. He died 40 years ago in a car crash or something, or he died from drug overdose 30 years ago, or we caught him and he's going trial next week, and they ended up getting, I think one person got court age 78, locked up, and he died a year later of natural causes in prison. Died in his sleep in prison, but they caught him. In a sense, although it seems like somebody made a comment that people are taking the coward's way out when they shoot themselves, suicide. It's the wrong way to look at it. They're basically just self-executing. They're basically giving themselves death row, and they're basically, okay, execute myself, because they've been caught. The police know who he is. The detectives know who he is. The family knows the victim's family knows who he is. So they're being caught. They kill themselves. Okay, it seems like it's not a coward's way out. They're basically executing themselves anyway. It's just self-execution. So they know when you die, you no longer exist. You stop. And so you aren't going to be a burden to society in prison with money wasted on you. So it's kind of, I don't think it's coward's way out when you kill yourself like that. I think it's just they've been identified. Okay, they can't go through a trial, but at least if they kill themselves, they don't exist anymore. It's their own. It's sad for the families. There's some of these people who have families who then this gets dumped on. That's sad, but people shouldn't behave stupidly. Anyway, I just think it's incredible that genealogy and DNA fingerprinting is able to identify murderers, and after so many decades have passed, 30, 40, 50, 56, almost 60 years later. It's amazing. I didn't know this was happening. And the fact they can predict what somebody looks like after so long as well is amazing. So yeah, I don't know how it must be, I don't think it's AI, I don't know how it works. But anyway, yeah,